I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Friday, March the 22nd. Brought to you in part by Cargill, Emerald, Right Now Mineral. Grass changes with the seasons. Shouldn't your mineral? Right Now minerals are formulated to allow you to match the mineral feeding program to the growing seasons, the forage conditions, and the nutritional needs of your cattle. Learn more at rightnowmineral.com. Pigs can fly. If you don't believe it, check out the lean hog futures on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange here the last week or so, but especially on Wednesday and Thursday, most all contracts were limit up, and on Thursday it was at extended limit, so just gaining mountains of ground there, like $20 of late. Ever since we got word that China was going to be needing some of our U.S. pork because the African swine fever has been worse than advertised, and they've culled like 1 million head of pigs, and their herd is down like 16%, and they're just going to be running short of supply, and so they're going to start looking to us to have some pork, and that's a great deal because we've got plenty of protein right here. But should it completely wipe out their entire herd? So far it's just been smaller producers or smaller facilities that's had it. It hasn't gotten into the major giant hog facilities that they have in China. Should it get in there and wipe out their entire herd? We don't have enough supply. We've talked about that. Should the Chinese ever become big beef buyers of ours, we don't have enough supply. And it could turn the cattle market on its ear, just like it turned the lean hog market on its ear. And you know, think about it. They've got 1.4 billion people over there compared to our 325 million. So we're less than a fourth as far as population the size of China. And then they, like pork is king over there. That's what they're used to. They raise a lot of it, and they're used to having that. But should they get to eating that, some of our U.S. pork, and they find out how good that is, and then they get to wondering how good the beef could be, and if they start buying some of that, especially if this export of our U.S. pork goes smoothly and everything works good, everybody's happy with it, we could be looking at something down the road for beef. But this whole deal with this with the hogs is really affecting all of the protein levels. But you look, it's of course all your speculators are riding on the market and trying to make some money out of what's going on. You can't blame them there. But then they're also looking and thinking that it's going to affect live cattle down the road as we start sopping up some of this extra protein. So they're going in and buying the out fronts, the late 2019 live cattle contracts, the early 2020 contracts. That in turn is improving the demand for fall feeder cattle. That in turn is improving the demand, like it needed any more improvement, for stockers to turn out to be ready to go into the feedlot in the fall or come off grass in the fall. And all of this is just snowballing. It's really getting to be quite a deal. It's going to be interesting to see if all of this pork export stuff comes to fruit. It'll be interesting to see how well it goes. It'll be interesting to see how much it helps the beef. You would think as much ground as the hogs have gained, it would pull the cattle a little bit more nearby, but it really hasn't. The board's been supportive, don't get me wrong, more supportive than we're used to hardly any time, but we haven't seen limit moves or anything like that. But would just keep your eye on the ball here. Another thing I heard about is a lot of these, you know, there's no independent hog producers anymore. If you've ever listened to me or heard any of my talks, I really hit on that hard. You know, 20, 30 years ago, a lot of guys paid bills raising hogs, especially those that were diversified in cattle and crops and things in the Midwest. Nope, in 1998, that all went away when they took the hog market down to 8 cents a pound, and nobody could live with that. It was so far below the cost of production. It just completely wiped out all of your independent hog producers. If you see an independent hog producer, he's raising show pigs. So there's just no commercial side independent hog production. There are some people that contract, that are just in contracts and don't necessarily work for the packing industry. A lot of them just simply have a facility, they send them feed, they send them pigs, and they do the work. But there are some people that are just contracted and stay contracted all the time, raising hogs and selling them to the packer, but they basically don't have much risk or no chance on the top side to get any more than what they write the contract for. But word is that they are so far behind what the current market is, maybe 10 bucks a hundred behind what the board is. Can't keep up. We don't know what the spot market for a live hog is because there's no stockyards left. There's very few country points left or anything like that, so we don't really know what one's worth. But their contracts that they're working off of are so far behind the board, and it's been a long time since we've had a lot of volatility in the hogs. Ever since we got rid of all the independent producers, everybody's contracted up and the packers control everything in the pork industry. It's been real steady, and don't get me wrong, that's what they would love to do to the cattle industry too, if it didn't take so much country to run a cow. But you see what happens. Some of these guys that are contracted up and not getting anywhere near the gains we've seen on these hogs here, and it depends on how often they update their contracts. When it comes time to sign another one, are they going to get to benefit from this? Is it going to go all the way up the pole and all the way back down before they write another one? They don't see any improvement, and the packing industry stands all the gain and don't have to share any of it. You guys pay attention to that, because that's what's coming in the cattle business. You feeders, you feedlots that's crawled in bed with the packers, that's what you're looking at down the road. And you guys that are kind of on the fence, that's why we try to stroke as much negotiated cash trade as we can, because it's just a little bit of the independence that the cattle feeder has from the packing industry, and as long as we can keep that together. Of course, they totally dominate and manipulate the market on it, but we've got to keep as much independence as we can as cattle producers. And I'm not talking about just cattle feeders, but growers, backgrounders, and cow-calf men, all the same. But let's look at the board. On Thursday, April live cattle futures up 32 cents, 129.90. At its high, it was at 130.45. June was up 52 cents at 123.90. March feeder cattle up 52 cents at 142.77. April up 60 cents at 148.92. And like I said, you go off into those fall feeder contracts and they're getting up there closer to where we thought they ought to be anyway. Your fat trade has been scary quiet, and I think there's a good chance we can get that 130, that 130 that we haven't been able to achieve all spring. Thought we'd be well into the 30s, in the middle 30s, maybe the high 30s by now, but we kind of petered out at 128 and thought we were going back down. But with all the floods, all the mud, all the death loss of cattle, and now this hog deal, I don't know how many more things we can stack up to be positive for the cattle market, but maybe this week. But scary quiet means that the market's going to be higher, and the packers need the cattle. In some cases, they need them for immediate delivery. They don't even want to call or talk or show much interest, because they might blink and be stuck with a market that's sharply higher. But hold your ear to the ground. Could be 130 here on Friday, and we'll see what happens. Got a dang cattle on feed report. Now the reports are all caught up with the NAS, and that's something that is not going to be able to help much, because it can only hurt. But you look at the cattle on feed estimates of the March 1st inventory, they're estimating at 99.7, so anywhere close to last year will be okay. Placements of feeders in February, I noted on an earlier visit, I don't know how we could have had too many placements with the gates frozen and 10-foot drifts in front of the load and chute, but 96% on that, so they've got that lower. which is always scary when they've got that lower, but it could be significantly lower, especially in the northern plains where everything was kind of shut down with the bitter cold that we had in February, if you remember that. It seems like the floods have just kind of erased all that. Marketings, they've got that up there good at 100.8, so almost 101%. But we'll see how that information comes through on Friday. And actually it wasn't too bad whenever those things didn't get put out, or they were way behind and nobody paid too much attention to them, because we haven't had to brace for the jolt of one in quite a while. Your slaughter has kept a good pace this week, even though many of those packing houses are in some flooded areas. But 476,000 through Thursday, 29,000 more than last week, and exactly the same as the same week a year ago. But look at your feeder cattle markets. Your real-time index on Cattle Market Central, based on the 800-pound steer, sitting at 140.90. That's up another $1.06 from just Wednesday evening, which was up. So it's gained big time ground. CME feeder cattle index, of course, it runs behind it because it's on a day-old information, and then they got to take time to punch it all in by hand and see what it comes out to be. But it's trying to keep up. But if you just watch it, your RTI is just one day ahead of it all the time. But and when we get to May and they no longer take out the flagged cattle like Fleshy Fool and things like that, it'll be exactly the same information. But your steer tracker on Cattle Market Central is that's the same figure as what your CME index is and what your real-time index is, but it's not a 7-day moving average. It's just the last 7 days. It's sitting at 143.07, so $2.50 higher than that. So that means we're going to keep gaining ground here as we go. And you guys that are interested in following the difference between, or the basis between your feeder market, cash feeder market, and what your feeder board is, you need to be watching that real-time index on cattlemarketcentral.com. Look at some of your sales on Thursday. Pratt, Kansas, big sale, 5,300 head there. Pulling this information just a little bit earlier than I normally do, because got to get to a sale in Gainesville, Texas, a Lone Star Angus sale. If you guys are in that area, come by on Saturday at the fairgrounds in Gainesville, and they're having their bull sale there, and I'll be working out for DV auction. But Pratt, Kansas, the early call on that, feeder steers were a little hard to get a feel for. You felt like they should have been quite a bit higher, but the quotes really weren't. Probably had a lot to do with what kind of cattle they had there, and then they've had some pretty good runs here of late. But feeder heifers were well tested, $2 to $4 higher, and spots as much as $6 higher. And your feeder heifer market was helped by several deals of replacement heifers that were in there. So then you had kind of two-way heifers there, people banging on both of them. But look at this individual quote on some fancy red Angus replacement quality heifers there. And I tell you what, these red girls are really popular. Some of these production sales that offer red Angus cattle, the females outsell the bulls regularly, but nothing hotter right now in your breeding business than a red Angus heifer. But 43 head of them in Pratt, Kansas, weighed 913 pounds at 139, and that far exceeds what your market is for steers. Look at another sale. Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina, Kansas. You look at Cattle Market Central market report, it looked $3 to $7 higher, with spots as much as 9 on some stockers, and I wouldn't say it'd be a whole lot different than that. Had kind of a mediocre run there at Farmers and Ranchers. Still kind of tough to get cattle out there. You don't have to go very far. It gets really wet in that country. But look at some sales that I don't always talk about. Lamona, Iowa, on Thursday, it was M.L. McCrae Day. They had a big slug of cattle coming from them. I've talked about those cattle before. He was my neighbor there in DeKalb County, Missouri. He sold his cattle, well backgrounded feeders there for a long time. And when he comes with a lot of them. He came with 9 loads, all black backgrounded feeder steers there, sold at Lamona, Iowa, and they were pretty darn heavy. And you may not be impressed with the prices that they bring, but you got to think about how heavy these cattle are. but they ranged from the high 8s weighing nearly 9 to 1,030 pounds. Your cattle weighing just under 9 and just over 9, bringing from 138.10 to 138.75. Had some cattle in your middle 9s bring 135.10, and some cattle weighing over 1,000 pounds, 4 loads of them selling from 127.25 to 130.10. But as a whole, he sold 510 head of steers at Lamona. They had a weighted average weight of 951 pounds at 133.85. Talk about another sale that we don't always talk about. Way up in Missoula, Montana, Five Valleys Livestock there had 54 head of steers weighed 821 at 135.25. That's nothing to sneeze at there. But I tell you what, the top sale anywhere on Thursday, Ogallala Livestock, Ogallala, Nebraska. Dwayne Mays and company up there had one whale of a sale. And you look at this market report on Cattle Market Central, pulled that, not sure if the sale was quite over there, but you look at these popular tested weights. 465 head of steers, 5 weights, averaged 563 at 186.78 on the average. And that's in the high 5s, the average is. So a lot of heavy 5s there, bringing nearly 190. That kind of gives you an idea how aggressive these guys are getting for these stocker type cattle. 461 head of 6-weight steers, averaged 643 at 171.64. 446 head of steers in the 7-weight category, averaged 750 pounds on the dot at 154.93. And the lofty individual quote out of Ogallala on some stocker steers there, and I'm sure they had a good condition on them for turnout. 72 head of 616 pound steers in Ogallala bring $186. That's your feeder flash for Friday.